Y ahora el pueblo que se alza en la lucha con voz de gigante gritando adelante. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. La patria está forjando la unidad. De norte a sur se movilizará. Desde el Salar hacia el mineral, al bosque austral. Unidos en la lucha y el trabajo irán. La patria cubrirá su paso ya, anuncia el porvenir. Y ahora el pueblo que se alza en la lucha con voz de gigante gritando adelante. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of the Red Radio Show here in Ubuntu Radio. I am Athina from NEDA, New Internationalist Left. And today we will be discussing with Jaco, a member of the Committee of Socialist Action, ISA in Hong Kong. Jaco, welcome to our show.
Hello, everyone.
So, Jaco, we have a lot of things to discuss today. Coronavirus is said to start from the wet markets in Wuhan, in China. So, the main question that people have in their mind is how did it start? What actions did the regime take to contain it? In the beginning, yeah. Go on.
Yes, in the pandemic has been has spread very fast in January, and we can see that it has a very big social effect and economic effect all around the world, including in Asian countries, and some. Because of the severity of the crisis in many countries, especially in European countries and in Americans. And some people may see that Asia seems to relatively better compared to them. And Taiwan has been taken as an example of a better practice to fight the pandemic, and of course there are some truth here, including because of the experience in the SARS in 2003 in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and China, and in the social awareness and the social consciousness is higher to fight the pandemic. One advantage is because there is strong distrust to the mainland Chinese government. There's a high awareness that this is a dictatorial government, and they always hide the seriousness of any diseases or disasters, and they want to cover up in order to paint a good picture from destroying the economy. And so both in Hong Kong and Taiwan, and also to an extent in mainland China also, there's a distrust to the government, and people feel that we cannot only rely on the government to do things, and we have to do things on ourselves to save ourselves from the crisis. And that's why, from the very fast, people move very fast to adapt to the new period, like including wearing face masks to clean their hands, And this is really play a role from below, play a big role, the mood from below, to prevent the crisis, the virus spreading. And also, actually, Taiwan has some special condition because we know that with China and Taiwan, there has been escalating conflict, including especially because of the more anti-China president Tsai Ing-wen has become president, and there's a and the mainland Chinese government has cut the tourism and changed the status of visa for mainland tourists to Taiwan since August last year. And that's why there's the decrease of number of tourists, and did have more favorable situation at the start of the pandemic to prevent the spread of the virus. But at the same time, we shouldn't really have a romantic pictures in Taiwan during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, because here it was presented as it was a very big success about the model that the Taiwanese government followed. There was no lockdown. So tell us a little bit more about it. How did they deal with it?
And first, there has been the increase of the production of the equipments for fighting pandemics did have some effect from the beginning of the crisis. And basically, in Taiwan, throughout the whole this period since January, the number of people infected did not really have like an explosive situation like in many other countries. So it's not the situation like in many other like European countries that the whole medical system collapsed. But at the like in January and February, the situation was also very worrying because actually there are not much those isolation wards in Taiwan. And when the outbreak of Japan was very serious in February, it was very worried that if it spread to Taiwan, then the medical system in Taiwan is not much stronger because it's also a very privatized system, and there are only 1,000 isolation wards in Taiwan. So if the number of infection was like Japan, or for example, that the medical system in Taiwan could not deal with it either. Mm-hmm. And yes, and I think the consequence for the working class people in Taiwan will be the economic crisis. It will hit the workers in Taiwan a lot because Taiwan is very, very much reliant on export to the US and also to China. And because of this global, now it's a global recession or even depression in the economic situation, then the export China, the economy in Taiwan will be undermined, and workers will suffer a lot. Already there are a lot of deregulation of working hours in Taiwan, and also the increase of the face mask production led to death of workers because of the overtime work in production line. Mm-hmm. And also this stimulus package is a very similar situation like other capitalist countries around the world. The stimulus package, they only mostly benefits the capitalists and the boss. The government, they give money to the corporations to pay salary, to pay their costs, and they under the name of preventing of a sacking of people. But actually this the number of workers who don't have enough jobs, their working hours are cut and their wage are cut. This situation in Taiwan also becoming very serious. So Taiwan is not really immune from this coronavirus crisis, but actually because this crisis is actually from capitalism.
Yeah, it's very interesting because we would expect that with no lockdown, the economy would not suffer as much as in the rest of the world. You mentioned also that the health system is not actually able to cover in case of an expanded pandemic, which means that also what the picture that we got in the West about Taiwan and about the health system, and they were discussing that all people have access to it, etc. Can you comment on this?
Yes, as I said, the medical system in Taiwan did not really totally collapse, mostly because of the number of infection is lower compared to many other countries. But the medical system itself is not really much stronger compared to many other countries. For example, there have been a lot of cases that the medical workers, they overworked, and many of them, they were really suffered of overtime working, and they caused a lot of discontent among the medical workers union. And this is and the government, they just try to give some cash payment for medical workers, but this did not really solve the fundamental problem of the situation, because the medical staff was not enough. And it is I think it's a very serious problem on the overworking hour in the med hospitals in Taiwan and also in Hong Kong. I don't have a figures about Taiwan on my hand now, but in Hong Kong, it is normal for medical workers to work for 12 hours, 16 hours every day. And the number of medical staff to the patient, according to OECD standard, is 1-6, but in Hong Kong is more than double of that. And so this is I think really this why doing better, why fighting better, because of the experience of the mass people, and the practice of the fighting pandemic from below did really play a very, very good role. And now, of course, the governments, including Hong Kong, Taiwan, and China, they try to exploit it to paint a picture that they are really doing a very good job.
However, I want to go back to Wuhan and what happened there, because even though they were preparing and everybody would expect them to be prepared, the Chinese regime first of all denied that there was a pandemic, that there was the new virus, and later on it delayed to take measures as the news that we were getting here. And finally they went on a lockdown, which was much harsher than the one that we had in the Western, in Europe, let's say. Tell us a little bit about it. We saw also pictures of people putting barricades and drones chasing people, saying to them to go back home. What do you think? How did they deal with it in Wuhan?
And first, yes, the government really mishandled this coronavirus from the beginning. And we know that the Chinese government is the dictatorial government, and it is a tradition for them to cover up any negative news that can damage authority of the government. And in December, there were already doctors and medical experts in China at the end of December to report to the government that this coronavirus can develop into something very serious. And but the government has reacted very slowly, and they already got it. There was a report already on the 6th of January. Xi Jinping on the top level Chinese Communist Party meeting already got the news about this seriousness of this crisis, but it took him for 16 days, not until the 23rd of January, they decide that they have to go for a lockdown in Wuhan. The most important factor is the economy, because even before the pandemic, China's economy was already in a big slowdown. The GDP growth of China last year was the slowest since 1989, when after the massacre in Beijing, that the other Western imperialist power, they had the sanction and the blockade of the economy in China. And so even before, and also the escalation of the China-US conflict, make that the Chinese government, they are really very worried about the economy. And at the end of January, it was the Chinese Lunar New Year, and it was an important holidays for people in China. Of course, the government expect that people will spend money in order to have a boost of economy. And that's why one of the big reasons is that they did not want to disrupt the spending of the holiday of the in Lunar New Year. And that's why when there were even doctors, the Li Wenliang, who was a doctor who just report to his colleagues about the seriousness of this crisis in a private messenger group. He was arrested by police and was told to be silent. And Dr. Li Wenliang died in February, and this triggered a huge anger among the mass people in mainland China. And that there was a wave that hundreds of millions of people on internet in China, which is under censorship from the government, they demand for freedom of speech. And the censorship system in China, despite it is extremely huge, but it couldn't really block all this information. It was spreading around. And yeah, this really had a serious effect to damage the authority of this dictatorial regime. And yes, and if this advice from the medical staff has been listened, that the crisis would not have spread around the world like today. Mm-hmm. And also this lockdown and the very heavy-hand police repression, and also it triggered a lot of anger on the ordinary mass people. In March, when the deputy prime minister tried to visit Wuhan in a local residential area, and the residents in the buildings in Wuhan, they chant slogans, and they chant "It's fake," which means that this, because when the Chinese official, they go to a local area, the official, they want to make a good picture of it and try to show that they have done a good job in pandemic. But actually people, they did not get enough medical care. They did not get enough, they did not even have access to enough basic daily use products, food, and the food price increased a lot. And this caused a lot of anger among people. And then the next week, when Xi Jinping went to visit Wuhan in the residential area, the government had to deploy police in many flags to ask people not to go to the not to chant slogans through the windows. So this has a very is a biggest damage of the authority of the since 1989, and the CCP, they know that they are in a big crisis today, and even now it's a bit ironic or a bit paradoxical that when because of the crisis in Europe or in US is much more serious, it seems give a temporary relief for Chinese government, because they can say, look, the US is doing even much worse than us. But it will not last long. The anger will not be. The anger will not. It will still continue because the crisis is still going on now. Yes.
I wanted to ask you also. I mean, we saw the pictures. As you said, that the people are angry and they are not getting enough medical attention. Also, we saw a picture of food being distributed in big trucks to the Wuhan area. But I wanted to ask you, actually, what is the character of the Chinese regime? You said it's an authoritarian, dictatorial regime, but here in Cyprus, we saw the hospitals that were being built in 10 days. And actually, we had many people saying, look what the communists can do, etc. So what do you think about that? Is China communist?
It is not. Yes, because China has the number of billionaires was more than the US, just because of the economic slowdown in last year. It was second to the US in the world, and all these Chinese Communist Party officials, they are super rich. They are not millionaires; they are billionaires. And Xi Jinping's personal wealth is more than a combination of the whole British cabinet. Okay. And of course, of the disparity between the rich and poor, and also the parasitic pharmacy industry that is on the medical system. This all shows that a huge amount of profit was made from the CCP officials, and also because they are capitalists on themselves. And the Chinese government has used the propaganda to claim that they have built 2 hospitals in 6 days, and it shows it's very efficient. But all these are really just a lie. These hospitals, there are a lot of reports, including doctors who were in Wuhan throughout the crisis and try to write a diary on how to fight the pandemic. And they report that a lot of thousands of people, they are just died without any medical care. And also the speculation of the basic equipments like the face mask to a very ridiculous prices, and also the government and officials were involved in that. It caused a big anger among the people, and the workers who built this hospital, they were not paid. Their wages were unpaid, and they also felt they are facing being discriminated, because it is very, very hard for them to look for another job. It is because they try to build this hospital, and there's a discrimination against them that are they infected with this virus, and they can't look for the job in Wuhan or in other area. That's this is the situation. And also now this unemployment rate will become a big problem in China. It's like a potential bomb of the Chinese society. And it is believed that there's 1 in 5 people in China is unemployed now. The official figure is totally fake, because it is the figures still saying that it's around 6% of unemployment, but because they only they don't count the migrant workers from the rural areas, because a lot of workers they are from rural areas and they move to cities to work. And the only solution of the government is more neoliberal policies to cut the pensions, to cut the social securities of the workers, and they still increase the military budget for over 6% this year in the so-called the fake parliament in China, the fake parliamentary meeting in China, which is still going on now. And yeah, so this is the workers, they are not more benefit from this regime at all. And the economic crisis will hit the workers this year, and as the workers in China are not allowed to form unions, independent trade unions, they will when they go on strike, it will be an illegal strike. So how can it be anything linked to genuine socialism?
Exactly, and communism, it reminds more of a very hard capitalist neoliberal government rather than even close to socialist or communist country. So after the China got over or started to have not zero cases, but very few cases of coronavirus, they started sending help to other countries like Italy, like Greece, like Cyprus, with material, masks and ventilators, etc. But most of these materials didn't come for free. There were orders from several countries. There were even reports that there were some faulty testing kits and medical masks, etc. But I wanted to ask you, do you see these acts as solidarity, or do you see it as an act of imperialism?
Yes, we need to understand the political background today, the global political background. Of course, there's no free lunch, and because there's now a unprecedented escalation of the China-U.S. imperialist conflict today. Now there's a blame game playing on around the world. China Xi Jinping tried to blame that the U.S. Or the military from the U.S. Spread the virus, which has no any evidence. At the same time, Trump from the U.S. they call this as a China virus in order to divert the attention and to play his anti-China campaign before the election in November. And also now there's a global anti-China campaign from the Western imperialism to demand compensation from China for making this disaster. And all this we don't as a socialist our organization do not support either China or US in this conflict, because this kind of blame game is just to divert attention and to play with nationalism and undermine the genuine solidarity of the working people around the world. And China, yes, so that's why under this imperialist conflict, China want to present themselves as a savior because of the relatively better situation in China now compared to US or many European countries. And that's why they want to present themselves as trying to save people from the crisis. And it is very ironic because China was the origin. The Chinese government was the origin of this disaster today. And that's yes, this is we know that Xi Jinping's this campaign of the so-called face mask diplomacy did not really have any success. Now the majority, because of course, like the many European government who, France, Italy, who received some of these equipments, they did not really, they are not really pleased with that because of the escalation of the pressure from the US, escalation of this China-US conflict and the pressure from the US. Now many of them, they try to be pulled further from China. And also, of course, we know that many of these test kits and the face masks are fake or of very low quality, which is really a disaster for the Chinese government. And it shows that it is the system, the production system of China is nothing more progressive. Because from the point of view of the ruling elite of China, of course, if they want to send something to please, to want to buy more authority from other countries, of course, they want to send some good stuff, but they just cannot control it. They cannot control this many bad, inferior quality of the goods. They are still used, and now yes, that's why this we don't see that China, they try to play with this. It's not a really genuine solidarity, and they want to, in this China-US conflict, they want to fight for more diplomatic, economic, and political prestige around the world, because they know that now this retaliation is coming from the Western imperialism. And of course, another important factor, they want to send a strong message to the people in the home country, because there's so much discontent in China, and it can cause any explosive situation at any time. So they want to they launch a very hysteric nationalist campaign to show that China is strong. We are our system is much better than the Western system. So people should just trust the government. We should not fight against it. And that's why this is a very important factor for them to do this face mask diplomacy.
And at the same time, it serves its imperialist interests. I mean, China is the second biggest imperialist country in the world, with investments in Africa and Europe, Cyprus, Greece even. And as we saw in one of the maps, that the plan that they have with the road and map plan that they have project, this one, the Bell and Road project, is trying to expand their imperialism and in the rest of the world, isn't it? Not as a regime, because as we said, it's not a communist regime, it's not a communist country, it's not that they are trying to spread the message of communism and freedom, rather than their own interests. Tell us a little bit about this project.
Yeah, it is a huge. It is both a economic but also a political project for CCP to expand their imperialist influence around the world. And basically, it was built on borrowing loans to smaller countries, starting from Southeast Asian countries to Central Asian countries, and also to through Greece, Cyprus, and also they go to Western Europe. And they want to build an economic corridor in order to expand the economic sphere of China and its influence around the world. And basically, in most cases, they borrow money for building infrastructures, including like port, airport, and also energy infrastructures, and to have a control of the whole the route of China from around the world. And this, however, we already see that even before the pandemic, this BRI had a lot of setback because of the domestic. It started with the domestic economic crisis in China, because many of these they borrow when they lend the debt money to smaller countries, they want to have a control of their technology, their infrastructures, and also the economy. For example, when Sri Lanka built this Chinese investor port, China demanded 1990 years of land lease in Colombo. And this is nothing different from the colonial policies. And now, because of this, and many of these countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, they are in a huge debt because of these projects. And that's why now they are already worried that this will call these countries, they are worried that they can, their economy can be controlled by the Chinese government, and there's more and more opposition against these infrastructures. And we know that these BRI countries, they are, because of this anti-China sentiment around the world, even before the pandemic, already we can see some of the change of the government from a pro-China government to a pro-US government. That will also become a setback in a lot of countries like Malaysia, Pakistan, or in Taiwan. And that's why these BRI projects, they have already have this setback. And another aspect is because of the very unstable situation in Middle East or some Central Asian countries. With China, in many cases, they have to have the military protection. They have to have they have to employ soldiers to protect their investment in these areas. So how can it be a stable or a sustainable imperialist project? And now, of course, because of the China-US conflict, with more and more, the process of the deglobalization will be even faster. And that's why this there will be more and more setback. US, they also have an attempt as the largest shareholder in the World Bank. They also have an attempt to stop the World Bank from lending money to China. And this will also cut one of the financial source for China, which make China why they want to develop their own Asian infrastructure bank to have more control on themselves. But yes, but because of the debt crisis in China today and the economic slowdown, many of these projects will face many difficulties. And actually, China's role today, like on these BRI projects, is not beneficial to these small countries. They just export their debt crisis. They export their overcapacity to many other smaller countries, and which make them even harder, more difficult to they will be even more controlled by the Chinese imperialist power. And so that this is it is a imperialist project with a Chinese characteristics. It's a state capitalist with a lot of state capitalist features, but fundamentally the aim is for profit and also for the prestige of the imperialist power. So it's not nothing more progressive than that. That done like the TPP from the US.
I wanted to ask you, you said that there is a lot of discontent now developed in the mainland China between the workers about the plan of the government, but also the fact that during the pandemic, there were not actually given either medical attention or better like welfare or better conditions for these people that were infected. And actually the problems will continue, as you said, with the racism and the inability to find job. And you said also that there is soon, at some point, we will see a wave of movement of something to change this regime, like a reaction of the workers. Do we see something like that now in mainland China? And what are your strategy and demands that you put forward for the workers in China?
Yes, I would like, on this angle of people, I would like to start to talk from Hong Kong, because the Chinese government, they try to impose a new national security law in Hong Kong, which will means to totally smash any democratic right in Hong Kong. We know that Hong Kong has enjoyed a little bit of autonomy from China since the handover from Britain to China in 1997. But now there's an attempt to have an extremely hardline measure to smash the democratic rights. And now these pictures show now is the movement of Hong Kong since last year, which start to fight against a extradition law, because this law will give power of the government to send people to China to be under the legal system. And that's why but then it developed into a general anti-dictatorship movement last year. And it was a very, very explosive situation for the whole year. And now the reason why the Chinese government want to impose this new national security law now is not mainly for Hong Kong. Their main target is for China. They want to show to the mainland Chinese people that they want to divert attention. They want to bring that there are pro-US forces in Hong Kong to trigger this movement. And they want to play this nationalist card to bring Hong Kong, the protests in Hong Kong, in order to divert the attention. And that's because they're really, really worried that the mass anger in mainland China that can be changed into a mass movement in the next period. And now we can see there's a certain delay of big mass movement. Workers and poor people not yet take to the street. Have not yet taken to the street up to now. I think because of the effect of the pandemic, create some social panic, and of course the cities were paralyzed, and the workers has not had time to gather together and to do a gathering together and to have a build up solidarity. And but then we can see that the mass protests in China, it will come because of the unemployment rate, of the decrease of wage, not only for migrant workers but also the local resident workers. They will also come to protest, and also there will be a lot of there are already 460,000 companies closed in China since the pandemic, and there will be a lot of cases of unpaid wages, which is a very serious problem in China. And that's why for us, a very important aspect of our strategy is to agitate workers to form independent trade unions, because this is a demand, a very basic demand in a bourgeois democratic country. But in China, this is banned by the dictatorship. There's only one official union in China, in mainland China, and the CCP is really worried that the formation of an independent trade union in China. This is like demanding one people, one vote under a dictatorial regime, or even more threatening than the demand of one people, one vote under a dictatorial regime. And there were already some smaller struggles before the pandemic that with socialist youth and workers on strike to demand for independent trade union in recent years. And that's why this is a very important demand. And of course, this itself is not enough. We need a working class party to fight against the capitalist measures in China, including demand for the universal pension system. We need to renationalize all these privatized companies and banks, and especially for the pharmacy industry, which is a very, very parasitic sector, privatized sectors on the medical system. And there are a lot of cases in hospital where patients kill doctors because they are so angry about the abuse of overcharging. Because these hospitals, although they are under the name of public, but they have to make money. The pharmacy industry, through this public hospital, they charge very high charge of medicine and the medical service. And that's why there's a big anger of this in China. And yes, and that's why these all companies, they should be under the democratic control of the workers and under the democratic management of the workers, to prevent this crisis coming again. And also we need to, another important aspect is to fight against racism. We know that in the world there's now a certain racist mood against Chinese or even against Asians in general. But within China, there is also racism against, like for example, citizens from Wuhan. They want, and also against the African people in China. And this is the result of the nationalistic propaganda of China. It is a very serious problem, and also because of the division and the wealth gap between the rural areas and the cities. And that's why a solidarity the working class solidarity against the racism is very important. And of course, this is linked to the global solidarity of the working class to build the international link, because you can see the capitalist countries and also the WHO, which is just an organization composed of capitalist countries, that they cannot provide any solution in this crisis. And that's why genuine working class solidarity from below, it is what is needed. And this is need a working class organization in China, but also around the world, a global organization. And that's why we are part of this organization to build this global organization, and we are International Socialist Alternative.
Okay. Very good. I would like to ask you a little bit more questions about the movement in Hong Kong. You already said some things about the demonstrations, because last year we had, if I'm not mistaken, it was 2 million people on the streets, which was 1 in 4 people living in Hong Kong. The movement last year reached all over the globe. The slogans, the energy inspired the youth to go down to the streets. You said that there were some demonstrations now, but can you tell us a little bit more how the attack to Hong Kong is happening and what is the reaction, how the people started to organize again?
Yeah, let me explain about this new the new national security law. It is a new law announced last week, just before this fake parliamentary meeting in China. This law will allow the Chinese government to set up a security agent in Hong Kong. So the mainland Chinese police, originally they did not have the right to operate in Hong Kong under this one country, two system, but then they will have the right to do it. And of course, there were already cases of illegal political kidnapping by the mainland security agents in Hong Kong before, but now they will be able to legalize it. And of course, now, last year, the huge struggle, they forced the government to cancel this extradition law to sending people from Hong Kong to China to be under the court. But actually, this new security law will reverse all these gains of the struggle last year. And yes, and now this is a this is a very important struggle. The protest of Hong Kong was in a downturn since this year because of the pandemic and the ban of any protests or any gathering of people. And the government, they attempt to use this law in order to extend their repression, to ban people from as an excuse to ban people from organizing protests. And now, after the law is passed, there has been illegal demonstration over 10,000 people with very heavy police repression of tear gas and extreme violence from the police. And today there were also a lot of confrontations of protesters around Hong Kong. And yes, this law basically is a to declare war on the democratic rights in Hong Kong, and there's no point of return. They will. This means there will be a extremely the social anger will be so much extreme that there will be next protests will come again, and mostly are young people. Last year there were over 8,000 people arrested, and over half of them were young people under 18 years old. And this changed the whole consciousness of the whole generation, that they know that if there's a strong mood that if we don't fight now, we will not have any more chances. And at the same time, because of the lack of the working class alternative, there has basically no real unions in Hong Kong. The workers' union has been very weak in Hong Kong, and that's why the workers are not organized, although they go to the protests, but not as a collective force. And the method of working class struggle is not taking a lead in the movement. And that's why now the anger can be diverted to the direction of like anarchistic method of struggle, like only by blockade of the road or even smashing some government buildings or pro-government business. There's a strong mood against any traditional method of organizing, like unions or parties, mostly because there's a distrust against these liberal pan-democratic parties in Hong Kong, because they have been betrayed the movement. They claim to support the democracy movement, but they always want to compromise and negotiate with the dictatorship. And that's why people feel that they should not trust any parties and turn to this anarchistic method. And there's a risk that the police repression will really give a big cost on this protest. And we think for socialist action, we advocate, we campaign for working class method of struggle. And now there's a need for a general strike in Hong Kong, and a real general strike organized by unions and workers' organizations. And workers should be organized to take collective decisions and to stop the economy. And these demands, the democratic demands, also linked to the program to fight against the economic crisis, including the layoffs, sacking of workers, and also the extreme wealth gap in Hong Kong, to demand a universal pension system, which Hong Kong doesn't have, and also to put all this economy, corporations and bank under the public ownership. And that's why socialist action we are a left force in this movement, and we have been very actively supporting this protest. But we think this movement needs a change of direction in order to succeed. And then other aspect is the movement needs to spread to China and to unite with the working class people in China. And because so far there's a strong mood of an internal perspective that this is a movement of Hong Kong only. And we know that the movement has been very heroic, and people were very determined to fight last year. But we also know that although the government was totally paralyzed last year, but it did the movement of millions of people on the street, but they did not really defeat this government. And because of the lack of organization, but also lack of the idea that the movement need to spread to mainland China. So Xi Jinping, who is the big boss behind the dictatorship, he was not threat. The CCP regime is not threat because it is in mainland China, it is in Beijing. And that's why the need for unity of the movement with the mainland Chinese mass people is also the key. And yes, and that's why we don't, maybe some people around the world, they maybe feel confused when they see US or British flag appearing in some of the demonstration, and they feel is this some kind of pro-imperialist movement. It is not. From the beginning, actually, for the British and the American government, for long years they don't care. They didn't care about the democratic rights in Hong Kong, and they don't care now either. But then now they try to be hypocrite and try to say something on supporting Hong Kong, because they want to use it as a tool to put pressure on the Chinese government under the imperialist conflict. But it is for their own imperialist prestige and the influence. And some protesters in Hong Kong, they feel desperate that although we have been fighting for sacrifice so much, and our protest has been going on for such a long time, but we are not strong enough to defeat the Chinese government. And so out of this mood, they try to look for support from the US and Britain. And we understand this, but at the same time, we warn that this is a mistake, and this will this first will allow the Chinese government to play the nationalistic card to divert the movement between Hong Kong people in Hong Kong and the Chinese mainland mass people, because they will say these people are pro-US, they're pro-British, and that's why we think this is not a useful strategy. And the key is the working class people solidarity with in China and also around the world.
Yes. Okay, very interesting points you put on and very interesting information. I mean, the bourgeois media here in Cyprus ignore completely for now the movement that is being organized there, and we agree completely that what we need to show is solidarity. And we did last year. It was the solidarity that people felt towards Hong Kong was amazing, and the way that the slogans, but also the mood was transformed from one country to the other. I want to thank you very much for coming to our program. It was very interesting discussion. And we want from our part to send all the solidarity that we can to the movement in Hong Kong and the work that you're doing. Thank you very much, Jaco. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
And from all that you're watching, thank you very much for being with us today again. We will be back next Wednesday at 5 with another show, another episode of the Red Radio Show. Until then.
Thanks for this opportunity.